Hello YouTube and Patreon, this is Nathan P. Butler and this is a project update for the month of June 2018. The fact that it's June already is kind of mind-boggling, along with the fact that as I'm teaching summer school courses online, we're already past the halfway mark. Summer is just zooming by, at least in a teacher sense here, even if I guess in a calendar sense it only just recently began. We're going to take a look here real quick at the different projects that are going on right now and where they all stand. But first, I did want to take a moment while there is time and a small enough number to actually get into in each episode instead of just putting them in the credits to thank all of those Patreon supporters. Remember, if you support me on Patreon, that is patreon.com/NathanPButler. Even with $1 a month, which is the lowest possible tier, then you wind up getting yourself a thanks at the end of this episode and in the special thanks page in the next edition of my book, A Saga on Home Video, which is now slated for sometime probably either late 2019 or in 2020, just depending on how time permits me to actually work on the thing. But at the moment, we have few enough Patreons overall of the 3 different tiers to actually be able to call those out and thank you by name here on the episodes. Kind of a bonus beyond what the tiers actually provide. So let's start with the Travelers Through the Butlerniverse, which is the first of the 3 tiers on the Patreon. My thanks go out to S.W. Chris, Jeremiah Mustard, Austin Pierce, Martin Dahl, Thomas Myers, and Ben Stein. That is, Ben P. Stein, not the Ben Stein as in When Ben Stein's Money. Unless he is doing kind of a Mission Impossible thing with a mask that makes him look very different than the Ben Stein on television or saying Bueller over and over again. So welcome, Ben. We then, of course, have our second tier. This is the tier that starts adding in the ability to get those audio commentaries for episodes of things like The Clone Wars and Forces of Destiny. In that tier, we have Jason Hunt, Bobby Craig, Robert Medina, Chris Morgan, Sam Howard, Stephen M., Joey Zitzman, Jeff Ellis, and Jared Rasher. My thanks to you. And then we have the top tier, the Nobility of the Butlerniverse, who get access to that exclusive monthly Q&A video. There hasn't been one recently because we didn't have questions asked, but yes, we've got some questions asked for next month in this month's collection thread. So if you are in this tier, make sure you get a chance to ask your questions before I gather those up to actually record an episode in early July for that exclusive Q&A. But yes, we do have one this time, and I have started to gather up sort of some random questions, some interesting questions people have asked me before to try to use in those months where maybe we don't have any questions actually getting asked. In any event, our Nobility of the Butlerniverse include Brian Snook, Aaron Melzak, Andrew Bettis, Benjamin Handelman, Gary Sherwood, and David Ray. It is David who actually has a question in so far for this month's Q&A. So if you want to get in on it, jump in while the opportunity presents itself here. Now, speaking of the Patreon, we did, of course, have new audio commentaries released in the month of June. This is actually for a 2-parter. So we started with Jedi Crash for Clone Wars, and then its follow-up episode, part of that 2-part arc, Defenders of Peace. Lots of Ayla Secura and peace versus warfare and that sort of thing, rounding out the commentaries for this month. I do already have the commentary recorded that will come up on the 1st of July, which is Trespass, so expect that in the near future. And then I'll be getting back into recording more, starting with, I believe, the arc of Blue Shadow Virus and Mystery of a Thousand Moons and so forth as we continue forward. Again, those are for Clone Wars in chronological order, not airing order, so we can actually watch together in the order they were meant to be from a canonical standpoint. You can also, of course, expect the exclusive Q&A, now that there is a question, to pop up in early July. Now, speaking of other projects, I mentioned already A Saga on Home Video, A Fan's Guide to U.S. Star Wars Home Video Releases, my book. I am still hard at work on the 2nd edition of it right now, primarily in swapping out pictures. So the 2nd edition, I've been convinced that even if it makes the book itself like between 20 and 30 bucks or something, even if it substantially increases the price of the book, that it would be far better to have the book be completely in color than to go with grayscale the way the 1st edition is. So I've sort of taken that to heart. As you know already, I picked up one of those photo box type things that you open up and it has good lighting and everything inside it. And I've been retaking pictures that exist already in A Saga on Home Video and taking some new ones. Things like, Laserdisc labels and stuff like that that wasn't really touched on in the 1st edition. And I've been slowly adding those into the book. I did run into a snag in that it was making the file size huge. And CreateSpaces, which is what I use to self-publish it, has a file size limit of 400 megabytes. So basically, as the numbers started to creep upward, I realized that I really needed to go in and change the file sizes of all of these images. So I'd already inserted like 100 pictures to take it basically from the beginning of the book up through the end of, I want to say, chapter 2 or so, only to realize, crap, when I'm going through and actually putting the pictures in, I'm just inserting them after I've cropped them without actually changing file size through resolution and stuff like that. So it was making the file too big. So I went through and resized all of them. I changed the resolution to 300 on all of them, changed the maximum width to 5 inches on all of them, because, I mean, if you look at the size of the book, once you count out the margins, that's about the width of a page, and it started reinserting them. And in doing so, I have so far managed to kind of keep the file size pretty commensurate with where it was before, as I'm removing other non-resolution changed, non-file size changed grayscale pictures and replacing these tweaked and sort of better optimized color images into the book. I have then taken more pictures, so I've pretty much got the pictures in for everything in the book up through the end or so of talking about the 1997 special edition releases when they were first released. So I'm getting ready to move into that end of VHS Rise of DVD, or Demise of VHS, Rise of DVD chapter, which is going to be huge, but I still have a lot of pictures, of course, to take. So slowly doing that, and then eventually I'll get into actually writing more material for it to cover things like the home video release of Last Jedi, and then eventually Solo and all that. But right now my focus on the book is mainly on picture taking, to make sure that those get in there, and it's looking beautiful with the colors all, or with the pictures, excuse me, all in color. It's very, very hot in here and frankly outside, and now sunlight is coming in, so as I speak I find my ability to come across coherently dropping as the temperature steadily rises in the room here. As for the Star Wars Timeline Gold, which you can find over at StarWarsFanWars.com/timeline, I am continuing to work ahead towards the new release, the last release that the project is ever going to see, which will be released probably in early August rather than late July, just to give me a little bit of extra time. Finally got Solo summarized, got quite a few comics summarized recently, got the story, including the DLC from Battlefront 2, finally onto the timeline for a summary. So basically a lot of the big hurdles I've been dealing with I've gotten in there, so now it's a matter more of really the last big hurdle being the last part of the season that just ended, the final season for Rebels, and some Forces of Destiny, and then the rest will just be picking up a few books and comics here and there. So still working on it. Final edition is still coming. Lots more progress just in the last month than really there was in the few months prior to that. So that is where a lot of my focus is going right now, just to make sure that gets done and out there. Along with that, you may have noticed I sort of pared down the StarWarsFanWars.com website so that now it kind of just drives you to the main places you might want to go to find things, and is only a place to find some of my own old audio productions. Even old shows like Chrono Radio just are not available on there at this point anymore. Trying to sort of clean house and streamline and just make it a little bit more of a contemporary thing in terms of modern productions rather than a bunch of older stuff sitting on the StarWarsFanWars.com website. So not much of a website left there as my focus shifts more towards the social media side, the Patreon side, the YouTube side, and away from sort of the static website side of things. Speaking of going into audio and video and things like that, let's talk podcast here. I got a new episode out of both podcasts that I'm involved in since the last time we did one of these update videos. The new episode of Cloud City Casino dropped on June 20th, and it's basically a quick discussion about Solo, talking about Jedi Fallen Order and expectations and hopes for that, a bit about the newest updates to Battlefront, including the Solo update, the season of Han Solo, and the newest updates, including bringing Extraction back and so forth. It's an episode that's kind of all over the place. Interesting, I think funny at times, but there's so much news around the E3 time that it wound up being something that kind of was a catch-all type of episode. You can find that, of course, at StarWarsReport.com, where you can also find Star Wars Beyond the Films, to do with Mark Hurleman. It's me and Michael Morris for Cloud City Casino, me and Mark Hurleman for Star Wars Beyond the Films. I'm involved with both, but the person with me does vary depending on which show you're listening to, for those who aren't familiar with it. We had the June 7th release for Star Wars Beyond the Films of an episode that Mark entitled The Toxicity of Fandom, Feedback Edition. It is episode 235, again from June 7th. And basically what we did was we had done that episode that I thought was one of the most important I've ever done in terms of Star Wars podcasting, which was our exploration of toxicity in fandom and the state of fandom at the time. That was episode 234. Then we had feedback come in from people about episode 234 that went into some other areas and gave us other jumping off points for discussion, which we then used to create 235. So think of it as sort of part 2 of our discussion about toxicity in fandom, and I think that the latter, say, 20 minutes is going to surprise some people because of some of the things that I say when talking from a psychological standpoint with regard to things like the Solo boycott, for instance. So I think you'll find that to be a particularly interesting and maybe enlightening episode if you care about the state of Star Wars fandom. Again, that is episode 235, though I would highly suggest listening to 234 before 235 because that's where that toxicity discussion begins. We are planning our next episode to be a much lighter episode as we talk about Solo, but we have not had a chance to record that just yet. Speaking of Solo, that brings us around to YouTube, which may be where you're watching this. I seem to believe, maybe I'm wrong here, but if I remember correctly, because I recorded my Solo reviews for the vlog and the last update, I think on the same day, and released the Solo ones first, I think I forgot to mention actually in the update video that I had put those out. So if you are looking for my thoughts on Solo, you can check out vlog number 26 or 27 on YouTube. The Voice of Reason or Lack Thereof is the title of my vlog. The first one is the spoiler-free review. That's episode 26. Then episode 27 is the spoiler-filled review. They were both released back on May 26th, the day before the official release of the last update video. But again, I had recorded them all on the same day. Since then, quite a few new YouTube releases. If you are a fan of From the Star Wars Home Video Library, kind of the flagship series for this YouTube channel, then on May 29th, we had episode number 162 of From the Star Wars Home Video Library that looked at the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones in their full-screen VHS forms from the UK. And then episode number 163 looked also at a product from the UK. That was the 2013 DVD trilogy packs. They didn't get the DVD Blu-ray combo packs like we did, but they did get DVD packs. We used episode number 164 to look at some more of that anti-theft DVD packaging, except looking at variants, how some of them are focused on actually looking like the products that they're espousing. Other ones are more generic with 20th Century Fox logos on them. We took a look in episode 165 then at the Clone Wars Seasons 1 through 4 Blu-ray set from the UK, which is the one of the Blu-ray sets for Clone Wars from the UK that we hadn't taken a look at yet. 2 more followed shortly thereafter. Number 166 took a look at the UK version of that collector's tin from 2006 that included the DVDs of the original trilogy and how that varies from the US version. I tend to prefer the tin from the UK version. And in number 167, we took a look at some of the little goodies that you could get if you purchased the Star Wars Special Edition on day 1 in 1997 in the UK at one particular retailer. A poster and a certificate and whatnot to go along with looking just briefly at the full-screen VHS box set from the UK from that day. We took a look at some more Legion content on June 2nd, where we checked out the Leia Organa Commander expansion for Legion, and then we checked out the Fleet Troopers unit expansion as well. We took a look at another new Star Wars RPG book, Unlimited Power for Force and Destiny. We went back and checked out another product for Ascension in Nate's favorite deck building games, Ascension Episode Series Part 12, looking at basically the Zombie Militia and Apprentice starter pack that they put out initially as a Kickstarter bonus, but that was finally released to be able to be purchased through their website. And, of course, just here in the last few days, here at the end of June, actually all on June 23rd, we had 3 new videos get released. We had the Battlefront Livestream Podcast, episode number 91. Again, me live streaming from Battlefront 2. It's probably the last of the Battlefront 2 live stream episodes. The game has lost my interest, and everything they're doing with the new stuff, putting sort of the new carrots out there, the new incentives to chase after, I find them to be way overpriced in terms of both credits and the grinding required to get them versus actually trying to spend real money for crystals to get some of these new incentives like the legendary character skins. So to me, their really could have been their last chance to keep me playing Battlefront 2 has pretty much fallen by the wayside. So I'm planning on moving it from our bedroom PlayStation 4 Pro to the one in the living room, which is a refurbished PlayStation 4 Pro, the one that died on me that I had to send off to get repaired and whatnot from Sony, that I bought the other one thinking that was not going to be able to be repaired. So we wound up with two of them. I'm going to move it from one room to the other, but that means that the ability to stream is going to be very, very limited, if existent at all, just because of the way the signals tend to work within the house here. So I'll still be able to keep up with Battlefront 2 for Cloud City Casino, but will I actually be live streaming it? Probably not. So until we get some new stuff coming out as far as Star Wars content, maybe Respawn's upcoming game, Jedi Fallen Order, whatever, probably not much in the way of Star Wars live streams coming anytime soon. When I live stream, it'll probably be more PlayStation VR material. And then, of course, speaking of Star Wars games, we have Star Wars X-Wing, which is in kind of that weird place with Wave 14, where they're putting out products that are still for use with the first edition of the game, but the second edition is coming in September. So now the first edition material being released is including the material needed to then use them as well for the second edition. Essentially sort of a combo pack in terms of getting stuff for first and second edition in the same package, where you can think of it as a new first edition product with a built-in conversion kit, like the conversion kits you'll be able to get for existing products in September. So we took a look at the two of those that have been released so far, the two that are from Wave 14. In episode 69, God, there's so many of them, 69 of my look at the Star Wars X-Wing miniatures game, we took a look at the Saws Renegades expansion pack, and then in episode 70, we took a look at the TIE Reaper and its expansion pack, along with quite a bit about how the product items, the components, differ, especially in the Saws Renegades episode, between first edition and second edition for those who are considering making that switch or making that jump to the new version of the game, or deciding whether or not to just stop here and focus on first edition only and not do competitive play and tend to stick with the game as it has existed without the new refinements and stuff to it. So quite a bit of new video content, primarily being stuff relating to from the Star Wars home video library or quick overviews of new Fantasy Flight Games releases, as you would expect. Work continuing on the timeline, new episodes for each of the podcasts, new episodes on Patreon, work continuing apace with the pictures for the new version of a Saga on home video, etc., etc., etc. Otherwise, pregnancy is going well. Obviously not for me, that's just my gut. Pregnancy is going well, still looking at early September as the due date, though they're saying that the first baby sometimes comes a little bit early, so we may be talking about late August, perhaps. I am, of course, still teaching summer school over the summer, teaching online as I always do, so we're about halfway through that. Can't wait for the extra cash for that to come in so we can knock out some bills to get ready for the baby. Really kind of a busy summer, both production-wise and work-wise. Lots of phone calls to parents and students to try to keep them engaged and that sort of thing. Sort of a new initiative we're really pushing this year. So busy time, but a fairly positive time, I think, mentally within the Butler household. I think as soon as I decided that the timeline was going to end and sort of started making moves to sort of get things ready for the baby and just kind of clean house a little bit. Not physically cleaning house, but sort of mentally and project-wise and just sort of in my approach day to day, I think that has added a better atmosphere that has relieved some of the tension that you may have seen evident and stress that you may have seen evident in these videos in, say, the last few months, or at least the months preceding last month, where things were a little bit on the higher stress side. So I look forward to continuing work on all those projects and hearing your thoughts on them and your reactions as they get released. And thank you very much, of course, if you're a supporter on Patreon or if you're just watching out there on YouTube. I really appreciate the continued support and input, and we'll be back next month with another project update. Thanks again.